So today I'm going to be talking about the difference between a shortcut and cutting corners, right? They sound like they're the same thing, but they're absolutely different. So I'm going to start by setting some very simple context, and I'm going to talk about where the idea of shortcuts come from. Now, today in pop culture terms, they would be called hacks, right? Life hack, biohack, growth hack, science hack, right? Although hack by nature would have a negative connotation, there actually is a positive side to it, which is basically the ability to create a shortcut, right? A shortcut is basically your ability to go from A to B faster, easier, and having more impact. More impact meaning getting the actual results that you set out to go after, right? So really, I mean, the difference between a shortcut and cutting corners is basically like this. I'm where I stand right now. I'm in point A and I want to go to point B. To get from point A to get from point A to point B, I have three options. Path number 1, path number 2, path number 3. I'm going to take a look at these three paths. I'm going to try to find the fastest, easiest, and the one that has the most impact that's going to get me the results. That's a shortcut. Cutting the corner is basically I'm going to go from A to D to C and then finally get to B. Doesn't sound very logical, does it? You're going to find that it takes more effort to cut corners because you're always hiding things, right? You're cutting corners. Like when you cut something, you lose something else, right? The key word here is you're cutting a corner. And the problem with cutting corners is you end up cutting so many of them because you may get away with cutting it the first, second, and then third time. You do it the fourth time, then all of a sudden you realize you don't have 4 corners anymore. And that's the danger of cutting corners. So I'll share with you a small story. I used to have somebody that used to work for me, and she was very good at cutting corners. All she would do is cut corners left, right, and center all the time. Anytime we wanted to achieve something, she would be finding a way to cut a corner. Anytime she'd bring me a result, there would be some corner that has been cut. And I would sit with her and try to mentor her and explain to her, like, okay, we need to get out of this idea of cutting corners and finding shortcuts. We need to just find fast, easy, impactful ways to get the result, because it's going to come back and bite us if we cut the corner versus finding a shortcut. So I wanted to just put that into context. This came from a question that one of my followers had when it came to defining hacking, and I was talking about the context of hacking, especially when it comes to pop culture terms, and they all stemmed from an experience I had with AdWords, who actually stopped some of my ads that had the word growth hacking in it, which had a positive connotation, but because it had the word hack or hacking or hackers or the derivatives of, okay, they would completely stop or prevent these types of advertisement taking place. So this whole story unfolded over basically 5-6 days of multiple reviews in multiple ways to get them to be able to release my ads, because they were worried I was what they classify as promoting and distributing bad behavior, or there was some actual much more polite or diplomatic term that they actually use for it. But I had to escalate several times in order to get this situation fixed. AI didn't figure this out. It was not built into the system, but it triggered a whole mountain of thoughts and feedback after a couple of videos I had released. And I felt it was really important to explain the difference between what is a shortcut and what is cutting corners. So for my friends, you're all listening to this video today, stop cutting corners and start finding shortcuts. There is a difference. They are not the same thing. Shortcuts work and cutting corners don't. I'll share with you a final story. I was watching television with my mom once, and there was a comical a movie on. I can't remember what it was, and there was a guy who kept cutting corners, and all of a sudden I tell my mom, like, oh, this guy's stupid, you know, this guy's really stupid. And my mom turns to me and says, son, is he really stupid? I said, of course he is. She says, the stupid is you. Whoever you believe is stupid, whoever says somebody else is stupid is the person who actually really is stupid. It's a wisdom that comes from our home country. It makes a lot of sense. It demonstrates the idea that the underestimated always wins. And if you look at history, you'll find that in a battle, usually the underestimated wins. There are some fantastic stories that talk about this as well. A famous war story that I love, and that'll be the last story I'll share with you, with also a shortcut, it's not cutting corners, is when Japan was attacking China. And the Chinese would be onshore and consistent battle with the Japanese, and they would always have they would basically consistently lose. So they found a way to basically say, well, why don't we go 15 kilometers back? By going 15 kilometers back, the soldiers would have to come from shore and then move with all their heavy equipment to move 15 miles in, or 15 kilometers in. I don't know what it was, either miles or kilometers. And they would then they would just get in the battle. But by the time they reached there, they'd already be tired and give up, and they would have exhausted the resource of their opponent. This is not cutting corners. This is basically a shortcut. What would be cutting corners in a scenario like that, which is what they were doing earlier, was basically, imagine they have the opponent coming in, they've got their guys lined up in the center, guys on the left, guys on the right, guys out in seed ready to come in, and they would basically stretch themselves out by not being able to cover the full area. So this, by the way, this story comes from The Art of War. It's an excellent, this is what I call a 101 book in the area of strategy. So if you want to learn about strategy and an early stage sort of growth hacking, this is an excellent area to learn about it. So just to step back to our initial point for shortcuts versus cutting corners, growth hacks are about shortcuts, not cutting corners. Thank you.